The Cleveland Browns just got hit with the most devastating 1-2 punch of this entire offseason, and it's all thanks to General Manager Andrew Berry's catastrophic mismanagement. We're not just talking about one failed investment, we're talking about a simultaneous collapse on two fronts that's leaving this franchise in absolute ruins. Jerry Judy, the $52 million wide receiver experiment that was supposed to transform this offense, is now a certified disaster that the Browns are desperately trying to unload. And David Njoku, the 9-year veteran tight end and beloved fan favorite who just announced his departure from Cleveland after posting an emotional goodbye on Instagram, is walking out the door while leaving behind a jaw-dropping $24 million dead cap bomb that will cripple this team's financial flexibility for years. This isn't just about two players leaving town. This is about a general manager who mortgaged the future to win now, failed spectacularly, and is now watching his entire strategy crumble into dust in real time. And the worst part? Cleveland fans are stuck paying the price for Berry's arrogance while their team spirals into complete chaos. Before we expose every ugly detail of this disaster, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because this Browns catastrophe is far from over, and you're going to want every explosive update as this franchise continues its complete meltdown. So let's start with the Jerry Judy situation, because this might go down as one of the worst wide receiver acquisitions in recent Browns history, and that's saying something for a franchise that's made more mistakes at the position than any team in the league. Rewind back to March of 2024. The Browns are coming off an 11-6 season where they made the playoffs as a wild card. Andrew Berry is under massive pressure to deliver a championship after trading 3 first-round picks and giving Deshaun Watson $230 million guaranteed, the richest fully guaranteed contract in NFL history at the time. The offense desperately needs weapons, especially after trading Amari Cooper away, so Berry makes his move. He sends a 5th and 6th round pick to the Denver Broncos for Jerry Judy, the 15th overall pick from the 2020 draft, who was supposed to be a dynamic playmaker. And then, to lock him in, Berry immediately extends Judy with a 3-year, $52 million contract. At the time, it looked like a steal. Judy had just come off a season in Denver where he caught 90 passes for 1,229 yards and 4 touchdowns, despite playing in one of the worst offenses in football, with Russell Wilson throwing him the ball. He made his first Pro Bowl. Pro Football Focus rated him as the 38th best receiver in the league out of 133 graded wideouts, which isn't elite, but it's solid production. Judy himself was ecstatic about the move, telling Cleveland media that he felt wanted because the Browns had been trying to get him for 2 years. He was ready to pair with Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore in what looked like a dangerous 3-headed receiving core. Berry looked like a genius for getting ahead of the free agency market and locking down his #1 receiver for pennies on the dollar. Fast forward to today, February 11th, 2026, and that entire narrative has been flipped on its head. Jerry Judy has gone from Pro Bowl receiver to bubble player, meaning he's a prime candidate to be traded or cut this offseason. His production in 2025 was nothing short of catastrophic. According to Pro Football Focus, his grade plummeted from 73.5 in 2024 to 56.9 in 2025, dropping him from the 38th ranked receiver in the league down to 106th out of 130 qualifying wideouts. Let that sink in for a second. The Browns paid this man $52 million, and he's now performing worse than over 100 other receivers in the NFL. He caught just 48 passes for 519 yards, his lowest output since his rookie season, and he's been dropping passes at an alarming rate, with 9 drops on the year, despite limited targets. He's averaging 12.2 yards per reception, the lowest mark of his entire career.
But here's where it gets even uglier. It's not just the stats that are damning Judy, it's his effort and his attitude. Multiple media outlets have accused him of making business decisions on the field, essentially implying that he's not giving maximum effort and is protecting himself from big hits rather than fighting for extra yards. There was a moment against the Chicago Bears this season that perfectly encapsulates Judy's disaster in Cleveland. He had a would-be touchdown pass ripped out of his hands by a defender for an interception. That's not a drop. That's getting completely dominated at the catch point by a defensive back who wanted the ball more. And then there's the infamous sideline confrontation between Jeudy and rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders during a game in December, where Jeudy was visibly frustrated and appeared to be chewing out the young quarterback on national television. That's not leadership. That's a veteran making a rookie the scapegoat for his own failures. The Browns trusted Jeudy to be their #1 receiver after trading away Amari Cooper, and he completely fell apart under that pressure. His chemistry with the quarterbacks has been non-existent, whether it's Deshaun Watson, who got injured early in the season, Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, the 2 rookie quarterbacks who were thrown into the fire, Kenny Pickett, or even 40-year-old Joe Flacco. Jeudy had a game against the New England Patriots where he didn't register a single catch despite being on the field. 0 catches. For a guy making over $10 million against the cap and being paid as the #1 option, that's inexcusable. He was targeted just twice in that entire game, and after it ended, he left the locker room without talking to reporters, a clear sign he's mentally checked out. Now here's the financial nightmare that Andrew Berry created with this Jeudy contract. His deal includes a $6 million option bonus for 2026 that's already fully guaranteed, meaning the Browns are on the hook for that money whether Jeudy is on the roster or not. If they cut him before June 1st, it would result in a dead cap charge of over $28 million, which is completely untenable for a team that's already projected to be anywhere from $3 to $15 million over the salary cap heading into this offseason. The only viable option is a post-June 1st trade, which would drop the dead cap hit to around $12 million and allow the Browns to ship that $6 million option bonus to whatever team is willing to take a chance on Jeudy. But here's the problem with that plan. Who's going to trade for Jerry Judy right now? His trade value is at rock bottom. He's coming off the worst season of his career. He's shown terrible attitude and effort. He's 26 years old, which means he's not a young prospect anymore. He's a veteran who should be in his prime, but is producing like a replacement-level player. And he's owed real money, around $13 million in cash for 2026, which isn't crazy expensive for a starting wide receiver, but it's way too much for a guy who's currently ranked 106th in the league at his position. Salary cap expert Michael Jeudy from Spot Track has Jeudy listed as a roster bubble candidate, which in NFL terms means he's probably not going to be back in Cleveland unless the Browns literally can't find anyone to trade him to. An early March trade would result in a cap loss of around $350,000, but if the Browns determine that Jeudy isn't part of the next iteration of their offense, they'll eat that dead money just to get him off the roster and send a message that underperformance won't be tolerated. Think about what this means from a big-picture perspective. Andrew Berry gave up draft picks to acquire Jeudy, then immediately gave him a $52 million extension, all based on one good season in a terrible Denver offense. He didn't wait to see how Jeudy would fit in Cleveland's system. He didn't structure the contract with easy outs in case things went wrong. He just assumed that Jeudy would continue producing at a Pro Bowl level and that Deshaun Watson would be throwing him the ball. Every single one of those assumptions turned out to be catastrophically wrong. Watson got hurt and has been a complete disaster since arriving in Cleveland. Jeudy's production fell off a cliff, and now the Browns are stuck trying to trade a player at his lowest value while eating dead money just to get him off the books and send a message that underperformance won't be tolerated. But as bad as the Jerry Judy situation is, it's only half of Andrew Berry's double disaster this offseason. The other half is David Njoku, and this one might hurt Browns fans even more because Njoku actually wanted to stay in Cleveland, and the organization couldn't find a way to make it work. On Monday night, February 9th, Njoku posted an emotional message on Instagram announcing that his time with the Browns is over after 9 years. He wrote, "Cleveland, first off, I love you. These 9 years have been a beautiful journey. I'm so grateful for all the memories we shared together. Thank you to the Haslams, Andrew Berry, and the whole Browns organization for everything. All my teammates I shared the battle with, I'm so grateful for you guys. The time for me to find a new home has come, and all I can think of is just the gratefulness in my heart. The city of Cleveland will forever be home."
That's not the message of a player who wanted to leave. That's the message of a player who got pushed out because the organization's financial mismanagement made it impossible to keep him. David Njoku has been with the Browns for his entire 9-year NFL career. He was the 29th overall pick in the 2017 draft out of the University of Miami, a former high school national high jump champion with a 7'1" vertical leap, who was supposed to be a matchup nightmare for defenses. And despite all the chaos, dysfunction, quarterback disasters, coaching changes, and losing seasons that have plagued Cleveland during his tenure, Njoku stayed loyal. He battled through injuries, dealt with being buried on the depth chart early in Kevin Stefanski's tenure to the point where he openly requested a trade, then came back and completely rebuilt his game to become one of the best tight ends in franchise history. Njoku's numbers speak for themselves. He ranks third in Browns franchise history in receptions for a tight end, with 384 catches, behind only Hall of Famer Ozzie Newsome and Dante Lavelli. He's 12th in franchise history in receiving yards, with over 4,000 yards. He's 6th in franchise history in receiving touchdowns, with 34. His best season came in 2023, when he made his first and only Pro Bowl after catching 81 passes for 882 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was a legitimate weapon, a complete tight end who could stretch the field vertically, make plays after the catch, and hold his own as a blocker. Former head coach Kevin Stefanski, who initially butted heads with Njoku when he arrived in 2020, eventually grew to love him and praised his maturation and leadership. But here's where Andrew Berry's financial engineering comes back to haunt the Browns once again. Back in 2022, Njoku signed a 4-year, $54.75 million contract extension to stay in Cleveland. Then, in the summer of 2023, Berry made the decision to restructure that contract to create immediate salary cap space by adding void years to the deal. This is the exact same tactic Berry used on multiple players across the roster, converting base salaries into signing bonuses and spreading the cap hits across dummy years that would never actually be reached because the contract would void before getting there. At the time, it seemed smart because it gave the Browns flexibility to build around Deshaun Watson and make a Super Bowl push. But here's the catch that's now destroying Cleveland's cap situation. When those void years kick in and the player leaves, all of that deferred money accelerates and slams into the salary cap all at once. According to salary cap experts, David Njoku is going to leave behind a massive $24.3 million dead cap charge when he departs in free agency. The Browns will designate him as a post-June 1st release to split that hit across 2 years, eating $9.5 million in 2026 and another $14.8 million in 2027. That's over $24 million in cap space allocated to a player who won't even be on the roster, won't catch a single pass, won't score a single touchdown, all because Andrew Berry decided to kick the can down the road in 2023 instead of planning for the long-term sustainability of the roster. And here's what makes this situation so much worse than it needed to be. Njoku's production did decline in 2025, there's no question about that. He caught just 33 passes for 293 yards and 4 touchdowns, while missing 5 games due to a knee injury. His 8.9 yards per reception was the lowest of his career since he was limited to 4 games in 2017 as a rookie. He clearly lost a step, got bigger and slower with age, and took on more responsibilities as a blocker rather than a dynamic pass-catching threat. Rookie tight end Harold Fannin Jr. emerged as the Browns' top target, catching 72 passes for 731 yards and 6 touchdowns, the 7th most receptions by a rookie tight end in NFL history.
So yes, there are legitimate football reasons why the Browns might have wanted to move on from a 29-year-old tight end entering his age 30 season, who just came off an injury-plagued campaign where he was outproduced by a rookie. But here's the problem. The Browns didn't have to be in a position where they were forced to choose between paying Njoku a fortune to stay or eating $24 million in dead money when he leaves. That binary choice only exists because of Berry's previous contract manipulations. If Berry had structured Njoku's original extension without the void years, or if he'd never restructured the deal in 2023, the Browns could have negotiated a reasonable new contract with Njoku that lowered his cap hit while keeping him in Cleveland as a veteran mentor to Harold Fannin. Or they could have let him walk in free agency without getting crushed by dead money. Instead, Berry painted himself into a corner where every option is bad. Keeping Njoku would have required a significant financial commitment to an aging tight end entering his age 30 season who just came off an injury-plagued campaign where he was outproduced by a rookie. But letting him walk means absorbing $24 million in dead cap for a ghost while trying to convince free agents to come to Cleveland and build around rookie quarterbacks who haven't proven anything yet. And let's talk about the broader context of this disaster, because the Jeudy and Njoku situations don't exist in a vacuum. These are just two examples of a much larger pattern of mismanagement by Andrew Berry that's now coming to roost all at once. The Browns just finished a catastrophic 2025 season where they went 5-12, fired head coach Kevin Stefanski despite him being NFL Coach of the Year just 2 seasons earlier, and brought in Todd Monken as the oldest first-time head coach in NFL history at 68 years old. The offense was ranked 31st in the league, averaging just 262 yards per game. The quarterback room was a complete disaster, rotating through Deshaun Watson, who got injured again and posted an NFL low quarterback rating of 23.5 before getting hurt, Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco at 40 years old, and 2 rookie draft picks in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, who both struggled to gain any traction. The offensive line completely fell apart. Joel Bitonio, the 7-time Pro Bowler and one of the best guards in franchise history, is likely to retire. Wyatt Teller and Ethan Posich are both pending free agents. Right tackle DeWand Jones is recovering from season-ending surgery. Jack Conklin, the veteran right tackle, has a contract set to void in 2026, creating even more dead cap charges. Essentially, the entire offensive line is in flux and needs to be rebuilt from scratch. The wide receiver room outside of the Jeudy disaster is equally thin, with Cedric Tillman missing significant time with injuries and no legitimate number 1 threat on the roster. On the defensive side, which has been carrying this team for years, there are major question marks about the future. Myles Garrett, the face of the franchise, almost requested a trade at one point before being convinced to stay by David Njoku, who pitched him on the idea that the Browns were building something special. Now Njoku was gone, and Garrett has to be wondering if he made the right choice staying in Cleveland while the team continues to flounder. The Browns paid over $60 million in dead cap charges in 2025 for 13 different players who weren't even on the roster, including former stars like Amari Cooper, Zadarius Smith, and Jedrick Wills. That's $60 million in wasted salary cap space that could have been used to sign actual contributors, but instead went to ghosts because of Berry's contract restructures and void year manipulation.
And here's the truly scary part about where this is heading. The Browns are currently projected to be somewhere between $3 million and $20 million over the salary cap heading into the 2026 offseason, depending on which source you believe. Over the Cap has them about $15 million over, while Spotrac puts them just under $3 million over. But that's before accounting for the Njoku dead cap hit, before trying to sign any free agents to upgrade a roster that clearly needs major help, before addressing the Deshaun Watson contract, which sits at a staggering $73 million against the cap for each of the next 2 seasons. Berry will almost certainly restructure Watson's deal for the 3rd consecutive year, converting more of his salary into signing bonuses and adding more void years that will create even bigger problems down the line. It's the same playbook he's been using for years, solving every immediate problem by creating future problems, and now all of those future problems are arriving at the exact same time. Think about what the Browns could do with an extra $24 million in cap space from Njoku's dead money, or an extra $12 million from trading Jeudy. They could sign a legitimate number 1 wide receiver to pair with their young quarterback. They could invest in offensive line help to protect whoever ends up being their quarterback in 2026, whether that's one of the rookies or someone they acquire through the draft or free agency. They could add defensive pieces to help a unit that's been keeping this team competitive despite the offensive disasters. They could extend some of their own young talent, like linebacker Carson Schwiesinger, who had a standout rookie campaign, or Harold Fannin Jr. at tight end before he becomes too expensive. Instead, that money's being allocated to players who won't even be on the roster, providing zero production on the field while handcuffing the organization's ability to compete.
The timing of this double disaster couldn't be worse for Cleveland. The Browns are entering a critical offseason where they need to make major decisions about their future direction. Do they commit to Shedeur Sanders as their franchise quarterback, a player who showed flashes but also looked overwhelmed at times as a rookie? Do they try to trade Deshaun Watson and eat a massive dead cap hit to move on from what's clearly the worst contract in NFL history? Do they use their high draft pick, currently sitting at number 6 overall, on a left tackle to protect their quarterback? Or do they go defense and try to replace the aging Myles Garrett? These are franchise-altering decisions that will determine Cleveland's trajectory for the next decade, and the Browns need maximum flexibility to make them. But because of Berry's previous contract manipulations, they're going into this critical offseason with their hands tied behind their back financially. And the really frightening thing is that this isn't even the end of the dead money parade in Cleveland. Wyatt Teller's contract carries $19.4 million in potential dead cap if he's not re-signed. Jack Conklin's situation is similarly problematic. Both players are entering their 30s, both have dealt with significant injuries in recent years, and both are unlikely to receive new contracts from the Browns given the team's cap situation and need for roster turnover. That means Cleveland could be looking at well over $40 million in total dead cap charges from just 3 players in Njoku, Teller, and Conklin, none of whom will be on the roster in 2026. Add in the possibility of trading Jeudy for another $12 million in dead money, and you're talking about over $50 million in cap space tied up in ghosts. How does a team compete in the modern NFL with that kind of financial albatross around its neck? The answer is they don't. Not without making significant sacrifices elsewhere on the roster. Not without hitting on every single draft pick, which Berry's track record suggests is far from guaranteed. Not without finding bargain free agents who massively outperform their contracts, which is essentially asking for miracles. The Browns are in salary cap hell, and Andrew Berry is the architect who designed this prison. Now, Berry's defenders will point to the salary cap projection for 2027, arguing that the Browns will have tons of space to work with once they get through this difficult period. And that's technically true. The team is projected to have over $118 million in cap space in 2027, which sounds great until you realize that's only possible because Berry has been pushing every financial problem forward into that year. It's the same strategy he's been using for years, mortgaging the future to create short-term flexibility. But there's a fatal flaw in that logic. First, you can't just write off an entire season or two while you wait for cap space to materialize. The Browns need to be competitive now. They need to show progress now, especially with a new head coach in Todd Monken, who's trying to establish a winning culture at 68 years old and probably doesn't have another rebuild in him. Telling fans and players to wait until 2027 while the team suffers through financial constraints in 2026 is a recipe for disaster. Second, and this is crucial, that projected 2027 cap space is only available because Berry will almost certainly continue his pattern of restructuring contracts and pushing money forward. When we get to 2027 and 2028, all of those bills will come due, and we'll be having this exact same conversation about how the Browns are hamstrung by dead money from previous contract restructures. It's a vicious cycle that Berry has created, and there's no clear path out of it as long as he continues to use the same playbook.
The league is watching what's happening in Cleveland, and it's not a coincidence that NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell specifically mentioned during owner meetings that the league is considering reforms to address the financialization of the salary cap. The Browns are Exhibit A in that conversation. Berry has exposed loopholes in the system that were always there, but that most teams were too cautious or responsible to exploit to this degree. By aggressively using void years, converting salaries to signing bonuses, and pushing money into the future at every opportunity, Berry has shown other teams what's possible, and the league doesn't like it. If the NFL does implement reforms in the next collective bargaining agreement, the Browns will be one of the teams most affected because they've built their entire financial strategy around these loopholes. And here's the ultimate irony in all of this. Andrew Berry's contract manipulation was supposed to give the Browns a competitive advantage. The idea was that by being smarter and more aggressive with the salary cap than other teams, Cleveland could field a more talented roster without exceeding the cap limit. In theory, it's a sound strategy, especially when you have an owner like Jimmy Haslam who's willing to spend real cash up front to make it work. But in practice, it's been an absolute disaster because Berry didn't pair his financial engineering with sound roster construction and player evaluation. What good is creating cap space if you use it to trade for Deshaun Watson and give him a fully guaranteed contract that becomes the worst deal in NFL history? What good is financial flexibility if you spend it on players like Jerry Judy who don't produce and become untradeable liabilities? What good is being able to manipulate the cap if it all comes crashing down a few years later when the dead money hits and you're left with nothing to show for it except a 5-12 record, a fired coaching staff, and a fan base that's lost all faith in the front office? This is the fundamental problem with Andrew Berry's tenure as Browns general manager. He's treated the salary cap like a Rubik's Cube to be solved rather than a constraint to be managed within. He's been so focused on short-term wins and creating the illusion of flexibility that he's lost sight of building a sustainable, competitive roster for the long haul. And now the entire house of cards is tumbling down, with Jerry Judy and David Njoku serving as the most visible casualties of Berry's failed experiment. Let's talk about the human cost of all this financial gamesmanship. David Njoku deserved better than this ending. He gave 9 years of his career to Cleveland, played through injuries and dysfunction, became a leader in that locker room, evolved from a raw prospect into one of the best tight ends in franchise history, and wanted to stay. But he's being pushed out because the organization's financial mismanagement made it impossible to keep him. And the Browns fans, who have suffered through decades of losing and dysfunction, they deserved better too. They deserved a front office that learned from past mistakes, that built sustainably for the future, that didn't sacrifice tomorrow for a today that never actually arrived. Instead, they're stuck watching Jerry Judy, a $52 million investment, become a bubble player after just 2 seasons. They're watching David Njoku walk out the door while paying $24 million for the privilege. They're watching their team remain mired in mediocrity, with no clear path to contention, no franchise quarterback, no offensive line, no number 1 receiver, and a salary cap situation that makes it nearly impossible to fix any of those problems through free agency.
And there's a very real possibility that this gets even worse before it gets better. Reports indicate that Njoku could reunite with former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski in Atlanta, where Stefanski was just hired after being fired by Cleveland. Imagine being a Browns fan and watching a beloved player who wanted to stay leave town because of salary cap mismanagement, only to see him catch touchdowns for your former coach on a different team while you're still paying $24 million for the privilege of not having him on your roster. That's the kind of gut punch that destroys fan bases and makes people question whether the organization has any idea what it's doing. Jerry Judy, meanwhile, will likely be traded to some team that thinks they can fix him, get him motivated, and unlock the potential that made him a first-round pick. Maybe he'll end up with the New York Giants, who were reportedly interested in trading for him back in 2024, before Woody Johnson vetoed the deal. Maybe he'll go to a contender that needs a veteran receiver and thinks a change of scenery will help. Wherever he lands, you can bet that Browns fans will be watching, and if he suddenly starts producing again with a different quarterback and a different organization, it's going to make Andrew Berry look even worse. This is the double failure that's now defining Berry's tenure in Cleveland. 2 major investments, 2 catastrophic outcomes, and a salary cap situation that's been destroyed in the process. The Deshaun Watson trade, which Berry orchestrated, has been an unmitigated disaster. Watson has been unable to stay healthy, posting a $73 million cap hit in each of the next 2 years, while barely playing at a replacement-level standard when he is on the field. Berry's draft record has been inconsistent at best, with major whiffs like Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round of the 2025 draft, a pick that made no sense at the time and looks even worse now after the rookie struggled throughout the season.
His free agent signings have been hit or miss, with expensive mistakes, and now Jerry Judy joining that list of failures. And his salary cap manipulation, which was supposed to be his signature strength as a general manager, is actively damaging the franchise's ability to compete. This is Andrew Berry's legacy as it stands right now in February of 2026. A general manager who took over a franchise in rebuild mode, made aggressive moves to try to win now, failed spectacularly, and left the organization in worse shape than when he started. The question now is whether ownership will finally hold him accountable, or whether he'll be allowed to continue this financial shell game until there's nothing left to sacrifice. Based on the contract extension he received from Jimmy Haslam back in June of 2024, right before the team's historic 3-14 collapse, and the fact that he survived back-to-back catastrophic seasons, the smart money says Berry isn't going anywhere, which means Browns fans better get comfortable with more dead money, more cap manipulation, more years of watching talented players leave while the team pays for mistakes made years earlier, and more losing. Jerry Judy and David Njoku are just the beginning. This double disaster is the canary in the coal mine, a warning sign of the financial apocalypse that's about to hit Cleveland over the next 2 years. And Andrew Berry, the man who created this mess, will be the one tasked with cleaning it up while making the same mistakes all over again. This is the reality for Browns fans heading into the 2026 off-season. A team in complete disarray, a front office that's proven incapable of building a winner, and a salary cap situation that makes the future look even bleaker than the present. The only question left is how much worse it can get before ownership finally admits that this experiment has failed. The information in this video is based on reports from ESPN, CBS Sports, Heavy Sports, Spot Track, Over the Cap, Pro Football Focus, Sports Illustrated, and various Cleveland Browns beat writers covering the team's roster situation, salary cap constraints, and player departures. Details regarding Jerry Judy's performance metrics, contract structure, and trade possibilities are drawn from publicly available data and reporting from NFL insiders. Information about David Njoku's Instagram announcement and dead cap implications comes from salary cap experts and league sources. The Browns' overall financial situation and Andrew Berry's salary cap manipulation strategies are documented through multiple credible sports media outlets. The situation remains fluid as Cleveland navigates its off-season roster construction, and final decisions regarding trades, releases, and contract restructures may change before the start of the new league year in March 2026.